What would it look like if the Dallas Cowboys drafted only for need in the 2024 draft? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your
Locked
daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast
Locked
Network, your
On.
team every day.
On. Locked on. Locked on Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That is $200 if your bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. It's a Friday, so of course it means a mock draft simulator. You guys loved our last week mock draft, mock 1.0. Today we are doing mock 2.0, but there's a twist, Landon. I'm going to make you draft an offensive tackle in round one because everybody in the world knows that the Cowboys need an offensive tackle. How do you think this is going to look if the Cowboys draft strictly for need in round one?
Well, I think it's probably pretty appropriate to say that it's the Cowboys who are going to make us have to draft a left tackle in this. Yeah, I mean, I think, I'm sure just like all of you watching, we have all kind of been through 100 of these simulators and done this round, right? Because this seems like a path that seems very likely, right? That the Cowboys, since letting Tyron Smith go, would need to go get a left tackle and likely in the first round. And we've talked about how the need matches up with what's there and that it's a good draft for doing this. So there's a lot of different ways to do this based on who falls to you and kind of you get very kind of mixed results depending on how the draft falls in the second and third rounds. But it's always a good exercise to kind of just run through a bunch of these. Because you're not going to get the same scenario each time, and in each time you get a different one, you probably get another step closer to something resembling of what actually will unfold on that Thursday night.
All right, so let's go ahead and start this. If you're watching with us on YouTube, you can see the mock draft simulator that we are using. We are using Pro Football Focus's mock draft simulator, and of course, you're seeing some pretty chalky picks go up overall. We're going to speed this up. Brock Bowers goes to pick number 11 to the Broncos. Roma Dunze falls to the Saints at 14. Now we've got a run of offensive linemen. We've got J.C. Latham off the board. We've got Mims off the board. We got Graham Barton off the board. We got Troy Fatanu off the board. Talise Fuaga. So of the top available offensive linemen, you don't get to see the best available players. You have Tyler Guyton from Oklahoma. You have Jordan Morgan from Arizona. And that's pretty much it.
As far as first round tackles, that's for sure, right? In this reality, I may consider, depending on what else is there, picking another player and then trying to either wait it out for the tackle in the second round or seeing if I could trade up from 56 to kind of get in before that little last bit of the tackle run goes. But for this exercise,
I'll fill you guys in, John, just who's available. Johnny Newton from Illinois. We've got Nate Wiggins and Kool-Aid McKinstry. Jackson Powers Johnson is on the board, which I think he's going to be. I don't know if you saw the report today from Matt Miller that NFL teams are not quite as high on JPJ. I do think the Cowboys are, but we will talk about that later. A.D. Mitchell from Texas, Zach Frazier, Lad McConkey, Braden Fisk, and then we should mention two defensive linemen that we talked about on Wednesday's show. Chop Robinson and Darius Robinson are available, but I'm making you take an offensive tackle. Of these two, which one are you more interested in?
I mean, the two that, just so everyone sees, Jordan Morgan and Tyler Guyton are basically our choices here. I would probably, I feel like you probably would too. I would probably take a Jordan Morgan, but I don't know. Like, I think it's tough to kind of determine exactly where the Cowboys are at this point for what they're looking for. But for me, I'd take Jordan Morgan. And I think one of the reasons that you really like taking Jordan Morgan is that you feel like he can play left tackle. But even if he can't, like if you feel like he can't, you feel like he's going to be an exceptional guard. So at the very least, you're getting the optimal pairing, one of the more optimal pairings with Tyler Smith if Tyler Smith ends up being a left tackle.
So one of the concerns that I think some people have about Jordan Morgan is his power. So I think they're always a little concerned that if he can't play tackle, does he have the power to play guard? What do you think?
I think, look, I mean, I think there's the grading here really shows you, and unfortunately, folks that aren't watching YouTube, but here we're seeing some of the grading of PFF, and I think it reflects it, right? Like, it just means that he's going to be a better zone blocker than he probably will be a gap man scheme power guy, right? So he's not going to be he can't really displace defensive linemen right now, probably especially interior defensive linemen in the power game. So if you're thinking about leaning more into a zone system, I think you're fine, because I think this guy's going to be athletic enough to secure the double teams, get to the second level. If you're asking him to dig a defensive tackle out of the hole or lead the way in a power scheme, I think that, it may be a little bit more difficult for someone like him. And if that's the case, then maybe Tyler Guyton is your choice. If you're trying to be a little bit more versatile, you're trying to be more power-based, then maybe you just lean into the fact that you're getting Tyler Guyton at left tackle. I mean, Tyler Guyton isn't, I don't think, powerful enough for left tackle either, right? You know what I'm saying? But I think you're probably getting closer there than you are with Jordan Morgan kicking inside to guard.
I worry about Tyler Guyton because I don't think he really has a lot of position flexibility outside of playing tackle. Like he's a tackle, and I kind of
he's a right tackle, so we got to move him to the other side too. So it's not like he's just a perfect clean, transition.
But I will say I do think I like him better at left tackle than right tackle. I mean, he's not a run blocker at all. And typically, most teams are, right-handed. They want to run the ball to the right. I just don't see him being a good right tackle in the NFL. There's just a lot of projection here, Landon, with Tyler Guyton. And I understand why teams really like Tyler Guyton, because you just don't see guys with this much size and athleticism, very often in the NFL. But I got to be honest, like if we're talking about like the next 2 years, I just feel way more comfortable about Jordan Morgan playing left tackle than I do Tyler Guyton. I wouldn't be surprised long-term if Guyton's a better player, but you better have a really, really good offensive line coach. And I have no idea who the offensive line coach is going to be on this team by 2025.
That's right. Yeah. And that's why I tend to think Morgan's probably a smarter pick. Honestly, like, again, we're working within the constraints that we've set up here. But the other thing I would really consider here, and if you mind, would you just give us the whole list real quick from and unfilter the tackles? I would literally think, that there's got to be somebody coming up for Nate Wiggins or who else?
AD Mitchell or
AD Mitchell.
Robinson, Darius Robinson.
If you could just drop back like 2 or 3 spots, I think you would be in a really good spot, right? Because if you're if someone's like looking to come up and get one of these guys, I'm not so sold that I need to have Tyler Guyton or Morgan that I wouldn't prefer to have an extra pick or either Tyler Guyton or Morgan, right?
And my guess is that you would likely have a team like whether that's the Bills, Lions, or Ravens, or even the 49ers at picks 28, 29, 30, 31, trying to jump up here to get a receiver. And that's probably AD Mitchell. I think those teams at the bottom of the first round are going to be looking for some size and athleticism. So maybe that's the guy where you could drop down from picks 24 to 29 and pick up, maybe it's a 3rd round pick. Maybe it's a pick swap, or maybe you give up your 3rd and you get their 2nd, right? But in this mock, we have to take out offensive tackle without trading down. Which one do you want to go ahead and pick?
Let's pick Morgan. I mean, I understand that he's not the higher graded in this thing, but to me, I think it just makes the most sense. It gives you flexibility. And I think ultimately you could end up with the better player at tackle in Morgan. I think there's certainly that opportunity for you.
I really like Jordan Morgan. I know he needs to get a little bit stronger, but he in the arm length is a concern. It's sub 33-inch arms. But if you look at like the history of Mike McCarthy offensive tackles, whether it was like I think was it David Bakhtiari had 33 inches, Brian Bulaga had 33 inch arms. Like he's okay with the guys that have a little bit shorter arms, as long as you can really move and mirror offensive pass rushers, and that's what we can do. Let's talk about what the Cowboys are going to do in the second round here of this mock when we get back. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Say goodbye to busted brackets because FanDuel lets you bet on every game of the tournament. Whether you're betting on a big upset or a number one seed, it's time to go dancing on America's number one sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 to use on point spreads, money lines. You could even go pick on who's going to win the whole tournament. My guess is UConn. That's who I picked in my bracket. They looked like a machine last night. But go visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and bet on college hoops until they cut down the nets. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. Every dayers, we want to let you know about the Locked On Sports Today podcast. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day? Are you having to turn down the volume because of all that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports Today, a free 24/7 sports streaming channel program for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all that unnecessary screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you the can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or on the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. All right, Landon, coming out of round one, I can already hear it now. Cowboy fans are upset. They feel like they reached on Jordan Morgan. Now we need to have a strong day two here. So let's look at the top players on the board. We had several receivers go ahead of the Cowboys, including Roman Wilson to the Eagles, Ricky Pearsall to the Steelers. We had Jatavion Sanders go to the Dolphins. That's fine. What position? Let's start with running backs. All of your running backs are on the board. And I know the last time we did this mock, people were not happy that we took Jonathan Brooks. But I should mention, what other positions do you want to see here other than running back?
Well, I would prefer not to take the running back here.
Okay.
Because I think for me, I'd like to wait to see what kind of shakes out a little bit. But so at this point, I'm honestly thinking about drafting pretty cleanly. Like, taking the best player available. You have needs here that you'd like to hit. I mean, I would definitely prefer an interior offensive lineman. So,
well, let's look at the interior offensive lineman. So, good list of names here: Christian Haynes from UConn, Christian Mahogany, Cedric Van Pran, who I'm not the biggest fan of. Cooper Beebe, if we want to move some guys off the ball. I don't know why PFF has him so low. Bo
just to help us.
I know. I mean, he's like an automatic pick because he falls to the third every single round. But of these guys, anyone stand out to you?
I mean, Christian Haynes is my guy. I really, really like him. Obviously the issue there is that he is a guard pretty exclusively. He certainly isn't a tackle. I don't know if he may have some center flexibility that I'm not aware of.
If you're looking at his snaps right now on YouTube, he's a right guard only. Like, he has not played a single snap anywhere else.
Yeah, but he's played a lot of snaps there, like almost 2,400 snaps. So I think for me, I would look at that depending on what your situation was. I think the issue there is that because you took JP Morgan, Jordan Morgan in the first, you almost have like too many moving parts if you put Christian Hayes in there, because now you're talking about like who's playing guard, and now you've taken away some of the flexibility that you wanted with Morgan. So I tend to think that we should look at a center only, or if no one kind of rises to the level we want, like Cooper Beebe could be, I guess, a situation as well, right? Because I think he has some center flexibility. But if we can get him later, then maybe what you do is you do draft clean in the second round.
I just don't. I think he's a second round player though, and I could be totally wrong. But to me,
I agree. Like I do too. And
I just think PFF's board's a little off here.
I would be okay. Like if we want to just take him here,
okay,
I'm okay with it, because honestly, I have him. I don't have grades on him specifically in Hayes, but I can tell you that just how I feel about him. I would say that they would probably be graded pretty similarly.
100% agree.
With the benefit that I think that BB has probably a little bit more flex, right? Position flex.
Oh, so, I mean, Look at BB snaps by positions over the last couple of years. He's played almost 800 snaps at left tackle, 1,700 snaps at left guard. He's started a game at right tackle or at right guard, and he's started multiple games at right tackle. Like, you can play him anywhere.
Yeah. So I kind of think that. Yeah, I'm good if we wanted to take Cooper Beebe
Okay.
here, honestly, because I mean, like I said, I really like him, and I think the thing I probably, if we're picking them straight up, I probably would pick Haynes,
But in
but
this
I think,
situation, with you already
yeah,
having a tackle, you don't need
yep,
another guard.
yeah, well, you don't need a guy who you're not certain can play another position. I feel pretty certain that BB can play up or down. We can fit him wherever we need. Now we have 5 solid offensive linemen. We and the 2 that we've drafted are not like butting up against each other
Sure.
necessarily. So
Let me offer you some other positions really quickly.
yeah,
Jermaine Burton, wide receiver from Alabama.
hmm,
Jalen Polk,
I like
Xavier
Jalen
Legette.
Polk a lot. Yeah,
Yeah. Tez Walker, my guy Malachi Corley, again,
of
way too
course,
low on here, who the Cowboys have a 30 visit on, by the
that's
way.
exciting.
Really, really
Yeah,
like him. The
yeah.
other position here that I saw that has some depth, you have all the linebackers available to you, including Edgerrin Cooper, Junior Colson. And that's really it. Those are the only 2 linebackers worth drafting in the top 75.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not interested in pulling a trigger on linebacker right now. The gap between a Junior Colson and Tommy Eichenberg to me is not multiple rounds. You know what
Okay.
I'm saying? But you're gonna draft them in multiple rounds different. So
Yeah.
I think we should kind of continue on our path there. The wide receivers are a little bit interesting, but not I don't know if it's enough to kind of move me off my spot a
All
little
right,
bit.
so let's double up. Let's fix this offensive line by taking our guy Cooper Beebe. I know PFF's going to give us an F grade for that one. I
I
don't
don't
care.
care
They're
what
wrong. They're
PFF
wrong.
says about this. This is an offensive
So
line draft.
so I think this gets people excited. You get Jordan Morgan and Cooper Beebe. First of all, you're really athletic on the offensive
Mhm.
line. All of a sudden, you've got a starting left tackle in Jordan Morgan. You've got your left guard in Tyler Smith. You've got a center in Cooper Beebe. And now you have depth with TJ Bass, Brock Hoffman, Awesome Richards. Feel pretty good
Mhm.
about your offensive line. But now I think you get to the third round, and this is where I think a running back almost has to be the pick. And lucky us, Bucky
Man,
Irving is available. Trey Benson is available. Audric Estime, who ran a
yeah.
4.61 at Notre Dame's Pro Day, much better, is available. Braylon Allen also available.
Ray
What are your
Davis.
thoughts here?
Ray
Yep.
Davis is a kid from Kentucky I really like as well. Very
Mm.
balanced player. I mean, this is why you wait, right? Like, look at all these great running backs that are still available here. To me, it's Trey Benson. I think
It's Trey
I
Benson. I wonder how realistic it is that Trey Benson's here, just because I kind of think he's a round 2 talent, but who knows? You never know with the running back position.
That's right. Yeah. And look, I mean, even if we wanted to say no there, I don't hate Bucky Irvin at all. Especially his
Mhm.
tape is incredible. Estime is obviously incredibly balanced player. Braylon Allen, we talked about, is a big bruising running back. Ray Davis is a good player, like I said, who has produced a high level in the SEC with not a lot of talent around him. Yeah, but I think to me, obviously, if Trey Benson's available, which sometimes the draft falls to you that way.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
I
we
would.
just we just took an offensive lineman ahead of like what 50 spots according to PFF.
Yeah.
Now we're
So
taking a value, so I'm perfectly good with that. Again, if we're coming out of the first 2 days of the draft, I know that maybe you didn't get the best value on Jordan Morgan according to the consensus, but I feel really, really good about Jordan Morgan, Cooper Beebe, Trey Benson as your first 3 picks. Now, Mike Zimmer might not be happy as you haven't thrown him a bone yet, but I love this draft.
but yeah, we also got to remember that this is the Cowboys way, right? Like when they get a new defensive coordinator or an offensive coordinator, they usually wait a season before they start drafting for that coordinator, right?
Yes.
Like and usually the draft after the coordinator shows up is almost exclusively dedicated to that coordinator. So yeah, I think that this was always going to be an offensive draft, and also this just look at the draft. It is an offensive draft. I
It
mean,
is an
that's just
offensive
the
draft.
talent is really heavy on one side. So don't fight that.
All right, let's make one more pick and then we'll talk about this draft as a whole
No.
next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We are doing a mock draft simulator. our first 3 picks, very happy. Jordan Morgan, tackle from Arizona. We took Cooper Beebe, a guard/center from Kansas State. And in the 3rd round, we hit a home run with Trey Benson from Florida State, falling all the way down to pick 86. Landon, this is why I kind of think the Cowboys have to draft a running back in the first 3 rounds, because not a lot. Once you get to the 5th round, like it dries up pretty quickly.
Yeah, I mean, if you wanted to take a flyer on a guy like Frank Gore Jr. a little bit later, who had a really great, not Senior Bowl, but what's the
Shrine game?
Shrine game, really good Shrine game. And I think there's guys in here that have, these are all kind of traitsy folks, right?
Sure.
Like if you scroll up a little bit, there's some other guys like
Dylan Lobby is the guy that caught.
Yeah,
Lobby
Dylan
caught
Lobby,
220
right?
passes in college. Like he's a receiving running back.
He's like your typical New England Patriot running
Yeah,
back, right?
that's my comp from is Danny Woodhead.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly who he looks like and when he plays like, right?
Yeah.
So there are guys here that can do things like to kind of complement and be a different dimension at the position if you wanted to go that route. But I would say that if you end up, not taking a running back in the first 3 rounds and you end up taking one of these guys, you're probably still going out into the free agent market and picking up a veteran running back who can, not carry the load, but certainly split the load with whoever you're drafting here. So we've already taken our running back. So right now I think we should just kind of look and see what's available. And
let's look at receiver, because we know that's a position that the Cowboys are at least looking at. And as you can see right now, nothing available. Casey Washington, Anthony Gold, Joshua Cephas, like it gets pretty well wiped out. If you go to linebacker, another position, Steel Chambers is interesting. Actually, I got a DM from him today. He was angry that I posted his 40 time on Twitter. Tyron Hopper, Jalen Ford, Curtis Jacobs, Trevin Wallace, who, again, I know we drafted him in the last one, but he's another 30 visit for the Cowboys. Seems like he could potentially be an option as well.
Would it smooth things over with Steele if we drafted him here? Because I do think he's probably the best of this group. I think Trevin Wallace is a guy that we are being told is better than our eyeballs see, or at least, I haven't watched a ton of them, but I just know that he is being whispered into the wind as a guy that is that NFL teams are much higher on than maybe draft Twitter.
I'm going to give you another one. Jordan McGee from Temple. This is a Cowboys 30 visit. Pretty good pass rusher when he's used in that way. 90.7 pass rush grade. Pretty interesting. Had a pretty good RAS score as well. Keep an eye on him as a potential like day 3 guy, probably more like of a 4th, 5th linebacker that can do some stuff on special teams.
Okay, that's an interesting name. I also mentioned I've talked about Nathaniel Watson before. I think he's a bigger guy. If you're looking for more of a kind of a thumper type, I think that's he's a run defense guy, especially if you're taking in the 5th round. That's certainly someone you can take an early round linebacker, right?
I just want to mention that I think I will be surprised if the Cowboys carry more linebackers this year. First of all, I think Mike Zimmer is just going to want more linebackers than what Dan Quinn wanted. And I also think with the new kickoff rule, you're going to want to have more of these body types of players, guys that could take up some space and can run a little bit.
Yeah, because think about what's happening with the kickoff, right? You're not looking for sprinters anymore because you're not having to run 40 yards. It's really just 15 or 20 yards, and then you're engaging a blocker. So
it's a sideline speed.
That's right. It is more about like a take on and then peaking situation. So you need some more linebacker type bodies playing special teams now.
All right, let's take Steel Chambers just to make him happy. He had a bad day.
Thanks, Steel. Sorry about the posting your 40 time on Twitter.
He wasn't super excited about it.
Not really sure why that's a problem, but yeah.
It was a 4.77. So.
Oh, that's why.
Yeah, that's why. All right, so to finish up this draft, Jordan Morgan at pick number 24, Cooper Beebe at 56, Trey Benson at 87, and then our guy Steel Chambers at 174. PFF does not like our grades here. They gave us a CF, A-, D+. I feel pretty good about it. Not the best draft that we could come up with, but I do think this is a very realistic draft. If you come in with the idea of, hey, we want to get a left tackle right away that can play, how does the rest of the draft play out?
Yeah, and I think if we decided that we did, if we want, and what's be interesting is that maybe what we'll do is we'll do one of these where you have to take a tackle in the 2nd round or something like that, because I do think that if You wait until the second round. That's why you see the Cowboys going out to Notre Dame to look at guys like Blake Fisher and some of these folks, right? Yes, because they just don't. It's not likely that that it's going to fall perfectly for you in the first round for an offensive tackle, especially since let's be clear, everybody knows that you're drafting an offensive tackle.
Sure.
So you need to have like a plan just in case. And again, a plan for when something positive happens, right? Like what happens if a really good player falls to you at 24 and you just feel too conflicted to take, like you don't want to take a really good player over, or you do want to take a really good player over Tyler Guyton, or whoever. So I think that, we did this exercise to kind of show you that it does kind of lay out sort of, pretty nicely. But I also think that there's opportunities if you decide not to go tackle in the first round to still go out and get a starting quality guy, but just around later and or maybe like with a slight trade up to try to make sure you get at the back end of the tackle run.
This is like a solid B draft for me. Like
Yeah.
if we're coming out of the draft and we're doing our podcast on Sunday night, I would be like, okay, I feel good about this draft. I think you got better. I think you got probably 3 starters, and I think all 3 of those guys are going to have a pretty decent impact as rookies.
Yeah, I agree. I think this would be a solid, double or triple in the.
I agree.
And that's what the Cowboys are looking for right now. They need good players at important positions, and I think this gives that first trio especially really helps kind of stabilize and improve your run game, which I know is obviously not the most important aspect of offensive football, but for the Cowboys who have an established passing attack and have the main elements of that passing attack coming back, for them to be able to add and improve the run game, I think helps add a dimension to the pass game and this offense overall that was missing, and they especially needed near the end of the year last year.
It's also a very Cowboys draft in the sense that Jordan Morgan coming back from a torn ACL, Trey Benson tore his ACL, MCL, PCL a couple of years ago, and then Cooper Beebe couldn't play at the Senior Bowl because of an injury. So, but really, this is pretty on par for what the Cowboys will do.
And an all offensive line draft, man, this is about the most Cowboys draft ever.
I actually like. I would be.
I do too. I honestly think would be a good draft.
All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. Every dayers, we've got some fun shows coming up next week. We're going to discuss some of the running back options. We took Trey Benson in round 3 in this one. We took Jonathan Brooks in round 2 of our last one. We're going to break down the top 3 running backs in this class and how they would fit the Cowboys offense. We're also going to look at some day 2 offensive tackles. Landon, you mentioned Blake Fisher. He's going to be somebody that we put in the spotlight next week, so make sure you check that out. We're going to have another mock draft simulator for you next Friday. I think this one's going to be when we trade down in round 1. What does a slight trade down look like? So be on the lookout for that. Go download the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher, and we'll see you right back here on Monday.